My son did not save me a seat at the family table. He put my chair beside the kitchen door, not even fully inside the room, half in the hallway, half in the place where the waitresses carried dirty plates. Then he slid a $20 bill across the table and said, "Keep the change, Caleb. Mom only thought you were worth 15. He did not call me Dad. He had not called me Dad in 18 years. Behind him on the diner wall were framed photos of everyone who supposedly built Hickory Creek. His mother, his grandfather, his uncle, the old waitress, even the family dog. But not me. Not one picture. Not one name. Not one trace of the man who built the counter, framed the cabins, and signed away his own reputation to save that place. My son smiled like he had just won the whole world. Then the attorney reached into a second envelope and said, "Dylan, your mother asked that this letter be read only after you humiliated your father." That was when the whole diner went silent. My name is Caleb Mercer, and for 18 years I lived in the same county as my son, while being treated like I had already died. Not officially. There was no funeral, no obituary, no stone in the ground. Just the quieter kind of death families give you when they decide your name is inconvenient. They stop inviting you. They stop explaining why. They stop mentioning you in rooms where your child is present. Then one day you see a family photo online, and you realize the empty space beside your own son was not accidental. It was edited. 2 days before the will reading, I saw the post. I was not looking for it. A customer had brought me a cracked rocking chair to repair, and while I waited for the glue to set, I opened my phone. There it was. A Facebook post from Hickory Creek Diner, a picture of the new legacy wall, 20 framed photographs lined up in perfect warm lighting. The caption read, "The people who actually built Hickory Creek. Family. Loyalty. Legacy." My son Dylan had shared it. He added his own caption. "Some names deserve to be remembered. Some don't." There were laughing reactions, heart reactions. A comment from my ex-wife's brother Troy that said, "Finally telling the real story." Another from Aunt Linda, "Your mother would be proud, Dylan." Then one from Brianna, Dylan's fiancée, "Can't wait to help you take Hickory Creek into its next chapter. No more dead weight." Dead weight. I stared at those 2 words for a long time. Not because they surprised me, because after 18 years I should have been numb. But being erased still hurts even when you know the hand holding the eraser. I was 62 years old. I worked out of a narrow garage behind a rented house on Sycamore Street in Hickory Bend, Michigan. I fixed things for people who could not afford to replace them. Cabinet doors, porch steps, old windows, church pews, dining chairs with 1 good leg and 3 bad ones. People brought me broken things, and I made them useful again. Maybe that is why I stayed alive. Wood was honest. If it was cracked, it showed you. If it was warped, it did not pretend to be straight. People were harder. People could sit across from you at Thanksgiving, pass you the rolls, and later tell your child that you were the reason the family almost lost everything. That was the story Dylan believed about me, that I had nearly destroyed Hickory Creek Diner, that I had been reckless, that I had been selfish, that his mother Marianne had survived me, that I was the shame of the family. And Marianne let him believe it. That was the part I could never sand smooth. On Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed while I was sanding the arm of a maple rocking chair. The name on the screen was Dylan Mercer, my son. I wiped sawdust off my hands before touching the phone. Funny because Dylan had never cared if my hands were clean. To him, they were always dirty. Dirty with failure. Dirty with disgrace. Dirty with the version of the past his mother had handed him. I opened the message. "Mom died Sunday. Stroke. Funeral already happened. You weren't on the list. Attorney says you have to be at Hickory Creek Friday at 10. Don't make a scene." That was how I found out my ex-wife was dead. Not with a phone call. Not with a soft voice. Not with "Dad, I know this is complicated." A text. 3 cold lines. Then another message came. "Also bring a jacket. Bus station gets cold at night." Then a third. Mom finally made it official. "You get $15. Enough to leave town quietly." Then a laughing emoji. I stood in my garage with the phone in my hand and the sander silent beside me. For a moment I felt nothing. Then I felt everything. Marianne was dead. The woman who once danced barefoot with me in the diner kitchen after closing. The woman who stood beside me when the first cabin frame went up by the lake. The woman who cried into my shirt the night everything almost collapsed. The woman who let me collapse instead. Dead. I called Dylan. He answered on the second ring with a sigh, like my voice was already wasting his time. Well, he said, look who remembered how phones work. Dylan, don't. Don't what? Say my name like you are my father. I closed my eyes. Some pain does not shock you anymore. It just finds the old bruise and presses. I'm sorry about your mother, I said. He gave a short laugh. You don't get to mourn her. I didn't say I did. No, you don't. You lost that right when you nearly destroyed everything she built. I looked around my garage. The clamps on the pegboard, the half-finished chair, the coffee gone cold, the little life I had made from the pieces they left me. Why do I need to be there? I asked. Because Mr. Alden said so, some formality. Then tell him I waive it. Number. His voice sharpened. You're coming. I don't belong there. That's the point. The silence after that sentence was heavier than shouting. He wanted me there. Not for closure, not for grief, for a show. Dylan breathed into the phone and I could hear the smile in it. Mom wanted the reading in the back room at Hickory Creek. Family only. He paused. Which is hilarious, considering you haven't been family for 18 years. I said nothing. He hated when I did that. Dylan did not want silence from me. He wanted anger, begging, a crack in my voice, anything that proved he still had power. I want you sitting there when it's read out loud, he said. I want you to hear what Mom thought of you, in front of everyone. And what did she think? That you were worth less than lunch. There was laughter in the background, a woman's voice. Probably Brianna, maybe a cousin, maybe both. Dylan said Friday. 10 sharp. Wear something decent if you still own it. Then he hung up. I stood there for a long time. The garage felt too still. The rocking chair waited on my workbench, one arm smooth, one arm rough. That felt about right. Part of me had learned peace. Part of me was still splintered. I walked to the corner where an old garment bag hung from a nail. Inside was my only suit. Dark brown, too wide in the shoulders, too old for any room where people cared about looking expensive. I had worn it to my divorce hearing. I had worn it to my mother's funeral. And now I would wear it to be told I was worth $15. I did not sleep much before Friday. Memory becomes loud when the house gets quiet. It does not arrive politely. It comes in pieces. Marianne at 24, laughing behind the counter with flour on her cheek. Dylan at 3, asleep on my chest during a thunderstorm. The first cabin by the lake framed in July heat while mosquitoes ate me alive. And Marianne stood in the gravel saying, one day people will come here from 3 counties over just for breakfast. She was right. That was the thing about Marianne. She was rarely wrong about dreams. She was just wrong about people. Hickory Creek Diner belonged to her parents first. Frank and Louise Callahan opened it in 1974 on the side of a county road outside Hickory Bend. 6 stools, 3 booths, 1 hand-painted sign. Frank made pancakes the size of dinner plates. Louise baked cherry pies people still mentioned at weddings and funerals. When Marianne inherited the place, she wanted more. Not in a greedy way at first, in a dreamer's way. She wanted cabins by the lake, a larger dining room, a gift shop with jars of jam and handmade mugs, a porch where travelers would take pictures before driving home. She wanted Hickory Creek to feel like memory even to strangers, and I wanted whatever she wanted, so I built. After my day job, I framed cabin walls until midnight. I laid tile on my knees until they went numb. I installed porch railings, replaced wiring, built planter boxes, repaired the dock, and made the long oak counter in the diner from boards Frank had saved in his barn. When Dylan was born, I carved his initials under booth 3, DM, right where his little shoes kicked while he ate scrambled eggs. For a while we were happy. Not perfect. Happy. There is a difference. Then the diner became successful. Travel magazines called Hickory Creek a hidden Midwest treasure. Summer weekends booked months ahead. Marianne started using words like branding expansion legacy. And Dylan grew up behind that counter, but not the way I had hoped. He did not learn how to mop. He learned how to complain when the floor was dirty. He did not learn how to thank Ruth, the waitress, who remembered every regular's order. He learned how to ask why she was so slow. By 14, he told guests the diner would be his one day. By 16, he corrected grown men on how to pronounce the Callahan name. By 21, he had learned to look at me like hired help. Marianne saw it. She saw everything. But whenever I tried to correct him, she softened the consequence. He's under pressure. He's just proud. He'll grow out of it. He did not grow out of it. He grew into it. Then came the storm. August 2008. 3 days of hard rain. The kind that turns a creek into a threat. Water rose behind the cabins. Cabin 6 flooded first. Then the storage shed. Then water pushed under the back kitchen wall. I had warned Marianne for months. The drainage needed fixing. The sump pump her brother Troy installed was cheap. The back wall had shifted. The gas line behind the grill needed inspection. But summer was money season. Closing for repairs meant losing bookings. Losing bookings meant admitting weakness. Marianne kept saying after Labor Day. Troy kept saying Caleb worries too much. Dylan, home from college for the weekend, rolled his eyes every time I mentioned it. Dad thinks every loose screw is the end of civilization, he said once in front of the cousins. Everyone laughed. Then the wall moved. Only a few inches. Enough to crack the gas line. Enough for the fire marshal to shut us down. Nobody was hurt, thank God. But Hickory Creek was suddenly in trouble. The bank was nervous. The insurance company questioned the repair work. Vendors wanted payment. Payroll was due. Guests wanted refunds. And the Callahan family, which loved the diner, when it was full, needed someone to blame when it was locked. It should have been Troy. He had done the repair. It should have been Marianne. She had delayed the fix. But Troy was her brother. Marianne was the family star. And I was the man who married in. One night after the diner had been closed for nearly 2 weeks, I found Marianne sitting alone in booth 3, the booth where I had carved Dylan's initials. The neon pie sign flickered red against her face. She had a stack of bank letters in front of her, and one cold cup of coffee between her hands. I had never seen her look that small. Not tired, not stressed. Small. I can't lose this, she whispered. I sat across from her. We'll find a way. She shook her head. You don't understand. If this goes bad, it won't just be a repair issue. They'll say I ignored warnings. They'll say Troy did work he wasn't supposed to do. They'll say I put people at risk. Her voice broke. My father's name will be ruined. Then she looked down at the initials under the booth. DM and Dylan, she whispered. If he finds out this family lost everything because of me, he'll never look at me the same. That was the sentence. Not the bank letters, not the insurance forms, not the fear of losing money. That sentence. She was not only afraid of losing Hickory Creek, she was afraid of losing the version of herself Dylan worshipped. The strong mother, the brilliant owner, the woman who always knew what to do. There was a contractor statement the insurance company wanted. They needed someone licensed to take responsibility for the back kitchen modifications. Troy had no license. I did. If I signed the claim, could move forward. The bank would calm down. Repairs could start. Hickory Creek would survive. But the responsibility would sit on my name. My contractor license could be suspended. My reputation would be damaged, maybe ruined. Marianne did not ask directly. That would have required courage. She just reached across booth 3, took my hand and cried. Please, she said. I can't be the one who killed my father's legacy. I loved her. That was not the mistake. The mistake was believing love meant offering my own back whenever her pride needed somewhere to place the knife. So I signed. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself once the diner was safe, Marianne would tell the truth. I told myself Dylan would understand one day. But shame is a powerful builder. Once people build a lie that protects them, they start decorating it like a home. The insurance money came. The repairs were finished. Hickory Creek reopened. The local paper called Marianne the woman who saved a family landmark. Troy became general manager. Dylan came home and heard that his father's careless work had nearly cost the family everything. He believed it, or maybe he chose to. A failed father is easier to hate than a frightened mother. At first, Marianne said, "Just give it time." Then he's angry. Then don't push him. Then maybe it's better if you leave for a while. 6 months later, she filed for divorce. At the kitchen table, she told me, "It's better if you go quietly." I asked, "Are you going to tell him?" She looked away. "Tell him what?" That was when I learned silence can lie louder than words. Friday morning came cold and gray. Hickory Bend looked almost exactly the same. The hardware store still had its faded green awning. The church sign still had crooked black letters. The water tower still had a blue heron painted on the side. And Hickory Creek Diner still sat off the county road like it had always belonged there. Only the sign was newer. The parking lot was smoother. The cabins were painted soft lake house blue. The porch railings I built were still there. I parked my old pickup near the back, away from the family cars. Dylan's black SUV sat in front, a silver Lexus beside it, a red convertible I did not recognize. The diner was closed. A paper sign on the front door read, "Private Family Gathering. Family." I stood outside for a moment looking through the glass. The inside had been updated. New pendant lights, new chalkboard menu, new shelves with local jam and souvenir mugs. And there, across from the register, was the legacy wall from the Facebook post. It looked even worse in person. Frank Callahan flipping pancakes in 1974. Louise holding a cherry pie. Marianne cutting the ribbon on the cabins. Dylan in a chef coat he had probably worn once for the picture. Troy holding a local business award. Ruth serving coffee. Even Biscuit Marianne's golden retriever sleeping near the pie case. But not me. Not the picture of me installing the sign. Not the photo of me holding baby Dylan on opening weekend. Not the shot of Marianne and me standing in front of the first cabin with paint on our jeans. They had not forgotten me. Forgetting is accidental. This was removal. I opened the door. The little bell rang. Conversation stopped. 20 faces turned. Some I knew. Some I had not seen in years. Cousins, aunts, old employees, neighbors who had once eaten at my table. Troy stood near the counter, heavier now, with the same smug mouth. Dylan stood beside the legacy wall in a navy suit, one hand in his pocket, the other around the waist of a blonde woman in a cream dress. Brianna, his fiancée. She had careful beauty, perfect hair, perfect nails, the kind of smile that appears only when it benefits her. Dylan smiled when he saw me, not warmly, like a hunter seeing movement in the trees. "Everybody," he said. "Look who found the front door." A few people looked down. A few smiled into their coffee. Troy chuckled. Dylan walked toward me. He had Marianne's eyes. That was the cruel part. Hazel eyes that once made me feel chosen. On him they looked sharpened. "Caleb," he said. "Not Dad. Never Dad." "Dylan." His gaze moved over my brown suit. "You wore that. It was clean." Brianna made a small sound, almost a laugh. Dylan glanced at her. "This is Brianna." She gave me 2 fingers instead of a handshake. "Hi," she said, as if greeting a repairman she hoped would use the back door. Dylan leaned closer. "Try not to make today about yourself." I looked past him at the legacy wall. I saw the post. His smile widened. "Good. Then you understand the theme. The theme, the people who actually built this place." That sentence moved through the room like a blade wrapped in velvet. Aunt Linda, sitting near the coffee station, looked at me and said gently, "Let's not make today ugly, Caleb." I almost laughed. Dylan could humiliate me in front of everyone. Troy could smirk. Brianna could laugh. But if I answered, I would be the one making it ugly. That is how families protect cruelty. They call the reaction the problem. Dylan pointed toward the back room. "Mr. Alden's waiting." As we walked past the counter, I noticed a glossy folder on the end of the bar. The cover read, "Hickory Creek Lake Resort, a modern destination experience." There was a computer rendering on the front, glass balconies, a spa, a new parking lot. The cabins were gone. The old diner was gone. In its place was a polished building that looked like every resort in every rich town pretending to be rustic. Dylan saw me looking. "Next chapter," he said. "You're tearing it down. I'm upgrading it. It was your grandfather's diner. It's my asset." I looked at him then. Really looked. He did not even understand what he had said. That was the problem. The back room had once been storage. I turned it into a private dining space when Marianne decided bridal showers and rehearsal dinners would bring in good money. Shiplap walls, long farm table, windows facing the cabins. That morning it smelled like Lily's burnt coffee and old resentment. Dylan had arranged the seating. Of course he had. He sat at the head of the table. Brianna on his right, Troy on his left. Beside Troy sat a man in a checked blazer with a smile too smooth for the room. Grant Keller, the development consultant. I recognized his type immediately. Men like him use words like reimagine when they mean erase. Everyone else had a place around the table, except me. My chair sat near the kitchen door, slightly behind the others, close enough to hear, but far enough to remind everyone I was not one of them. The message was not subtle. It was not meant to be. Dylan looked at the chair, then at me. Sorry, he said. We ran out of room. There were 2 empty chairs by the window. No one said anything. That was the family I remembered. Not always cruel with their own mouths. Sometimes just silent while someone else did the work. I sat in the chair by the kitchen door. A waitress brushed past me carrying a tray of dirty cups and whispered, "Sorry." Not Ruth, a younger girl. She probably did not know the history. She just knew the seating was wrong. That small whisper of decency almost hurt more than the insult. Mr. Alden stood at the far end of the room. He was the town attorney, thin and white-haired with glasses hanging from a cord around his neck. I remembered him from years ago. He had handled Frank Callahan's estate. He looked older now, but not weaker. He looked like a man who had spent a lifetime watching families turn memory into property. His eyes found me. "Mr. Mercer," he said. Respectfully, the room noticed. So did Dylan. His jaw tightened. Mr. Alden opened a leather folder. Marianne Callahan. Mercer requested that portions of her final instructions be read here at Hickory Creek in the presence of family and named parties. Dylan leaned back. "Let's get started." Mr. Alden looked over his glasses. "I will read this in the order your mother requested." Dylan smiled tightly. Of course. The first part was ordinary, or it seemed ordinary. Marianne left $5,000 to Ruth, the waitress, who had worked breakfast since 1996. She left Earl and Janine, the older couple, who lived behind cabin 3, and tended the flowers 1 year of property taxes. She left money to the high school culinary program. She left a donation to the animal shelter where she had adopted Biscuit. Those gifts hurt more than I expected, because they reminded me Marianne had not been only cruel. Nobody is only one thing. That is why betrayal is so hard. If people were monsters every hour of the day, we would stop loving them much sooner. Dylan grew impatient fast. When Ruth's name was read, he muttered, "She already got paid." When the scholarship came up, he checked his watch. When the animal shelter was mentioned, Brianna whispered seriously. Mr. Alden continued, "To my brother Troy Callahan. I leave the antique Coca-Cola clock from the front counter on the condition that he finally returns the $300 he took from the register during Labor Day weekend in 2014. Troy's head snapped up. "What?" A few people stared. His face turned red. "That's not funny." Mr. Alden did not look up. "To Brianna Vale, my son's fiancée. I leave the pearl bracelet she borrowed from my bedroom drawer last Christmas and forgot to return." Brianna went pale. Dylan sat forward. "Brianna," she whispered I was going to put it back. "Not now," Dylan snapped. "Not that isn't true. Not don't talk to her like that. Just not now." Because to Dylan, people mattered only until they became inconvenient. Mr. Alden turned another page. "To Grant Keller, who advised my son that Hickory Creek should be converted into a luxury lake concept, I leave one free breakfast, provided he eats it before advising my son to bulldoze the memories of people he never bothered to meet." Grant's smile disappeared. Dylan slammed his palm on the table. The sound cracked through the room. "Enough!" Brianna jumped. Troy stared at his hands. Mr. Alden slowly removed his glasses. "Excuse me," Dylan pointed at the folder. "I'm not sitting here while my dead mother takes shots at people. Get to the real part. Your mother considered all of it real. No, this is sentimental garbage. We all know why we're here. And why is that? Dylan laughed. To transfer Hickory Creek to me. There it was. No grief, no sadness, no memory, just appetite. Mom spent years telling everyone I was the future of this place, Dylan said. So let's stop wasting time with waitress tips and dog charities. I have contractors waiting. We're breaking ground before winter if Grant can keep the permits moving. A murmur passed through the room. Even Aunt Linda looked uncomfortable. Ruth, standing near the kitchen doorway, went still. Dylan noticed and rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. Don't all clutch your pearls. Mom loved this place, sure. But love doesn't pay property taxes. Hickory Creek has been stuck in the past for 20 years. He looked at me. Some people like being stuck there. That was when Ruth spoke, quietly. This place fed your family, Dylan. He did not even look at her. And now it's going to fund mine. The room went colder. Mr. Alden looked at Dylan for a long moment. Then he put his glasses back on. As you wish. He turned a page. Regarding my ex-husband, Caleb James Mercer. Every eye moved to me. Dylan smiled. He had been waiting. I folded my hands in my lap. There was a scar across my thumb from a cabinet saw in 1999. I remember noticing it. The mind finds strange places to hide when humiliation approaches. Mr. Alden read to Caleb, I leave the sum of $15 in cash. The room did not laugh at first. It inhaled. That was worse. Then Dylan started. A small chuckle. Then a bigger one. Then he laughed so hard he wiped his eye. There it is, he said. There it is. Brianna covered her mouth, smiling behind her fingers. Troy shook his head like he had just heard the best joke in town. Dylan stood and pulled out his wallet. You know what, I'll be generous. He took out a $20 bill and flicked it across the table. It slid across the polished wood and landed near the edge, then dropped off onto the floor beside my chair. He laughed harder. Oops. No one moved. The bill lay on the floor near my shoe. Dylan tilted his head. Go ahead, Caleb. Pick it up. Aunt Linda whispered, Dylan, honey, but she did not tell him to stop. She looked at me instead and said, please don't make this harder. That sentence settled in my chest like ice. Please don't make this harder. Not for me. For them. For the people who wanted cruelty without consequences. Dylan walked around the table, picked up the bill himself, and placed it in front of me. There he said, keep the change. Mom only thought you were worth 15. The room went quiet again. Not because they disapproved, because they wanted to see what I would do. Dylan leaned down close enough for only me to hear. She priced you herself, he whispered. That's what kills you, isn't it? I looked at the 20, then at him, then at Mr. Alden. The attorney's folder was still open. His hand rested on a second envelope. This was not over. Dylan returned to his chair triumphant. Okay, he said. Now that charity is done, let's talk about my property. Mr. Alden said, sit down, Dylan. Dylan froze. What did you say? I said, sit down. This is my diner. At this moment, Mr. Alden said that remains unconfirmed. The room changed. Not loudly. Completely. Brianna's smile vanished. Grant sat up. Troy looked toward the door. Dylan lowered himself into the chair, but his eyes were burning. Mr. Alden lifted the cream envelope. Across the front was Marianne's handwriting. To be read after Caleb receives the $15. My heartbeat changed. Mr. Alden broke the seal. This letter was written 6 days before Marianne's stroke. She asked that it be read aloud exactly as written. Dylan shook his head. Number. Mr. Alden unfolded the letter, and Marianne's words entered the room. My son Dylan, he read, if you are hearing this, then you have probably done exactly what I feared you would do. You have laughed at your father. Dylan's face went blank. The room went still. You probably thought the $15 was my final insult to him. It was not. It was a mirror. I wanted everyone in this room to see what kind of man you had become when you believed there were no consequences left. Brianna lowered her hand from her mouth. Troy stopped breathing through his nose. Grant looked down. Mr. Alden continued, for 18 years, I let you believe your father nearly destroyed Hickory Creek. I let you believe he was careless, selfish, and weak. I let this family remove him from photographs, holidays, conversations, and history. I let you call him by his first name. I heard it every time, and every time I chose my comfort over the truth. My throat tightened. I stared at the table. Not at Dylan, not at anyone. The wood grain blurred beneath my eyes. I had sanded that table myself. Marianne bought the boards from a barn outside Grand Rapids, and I spent 3 nights making it smooth enough for wedding parties. Mr. Alden read on. I did not lose Caleb in the divorce. I fed him to this family so I could keep being the hero. A sound moved through the room. Not a gasp exactly. More like several people realizing at once that the floor beneath them was not solid. Dylan whispered, no. One word, small. Young. Mr. Alden did not stop. In 2008, after the flood, Hickory Creek was not in danger because of Caleb. It was in danger because I ignored his warnings. He told me the drainage behind the kitchen needed repair. He told me Troy's work was unsafe. He told me we had to close before something worse happened. I refused because I wanted one more summer of money. Troy stood halfway. That's not fair. Mr. Alden looked at him. Sit down. Troy sat. When the wall shifted and the gas line cracked, I panicked. The bank was watching us. Insurance was questioning the repairs. If the truth came out, Troy would have been liable, I would have been exposed, and Hickory Creek might have been lost. So I asked Caleb to sign the contractor statement. Dylan shook his head harder. No, she wouldn't. He signed. Mr. Alden read not because he was guilty, but because I begged him. He took responsibility for work he did not perform. He let his license, his reputation, and his name absorb the damage so my father's diner could survive. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the refrigerator behind the wall. I pressed my hands flat against my knees to stop them from shaking. He saved Hickory Creek. Then I punished him for saving it. A sound came from the kitchen doorway. Ruth. She had come in wearing a black dress under her white apron. Her eyes were wet. I'm sorry, she mouthed. That almost undid me. Not because it was enough. It was not. But after 18 years, even one honest apology felt like light through a crack. Mr. Alden continued. When the claim was paid and the bank backed off, I had the chance to tell the truth. I did not. I let Caleb become the villain because his disgrace protected my pride. I let Dylan believe his father was the shame of this family because it was easier than letting my son see that I had been the coward. Dylan looked at Troy. You knew. Troy's face went gray. Dylan said it again louder. You knew. Troy swallowed. Your mother handled it. 4 words, ugly enough to explain 18 years. Dylan looked around the room. Cousins stared down. An aunt wiped her eye but said nothing. Brianna looked at her engagement ring as if calculating its resale value. Grant suddenly seemed very interested in the table. Then Dylan turned toward me. For 1 second I thought he might break. Instead, his face hardened. So what? The words were quiet, cold. So what if he signed something? So what if Mom felt guilty at the end? That doesn't make him family again. Something inside me settled. Not healed, settled. There are moments when love does not die loudly. It simply stands, puts on its coat, and leaves the room. Mr. Alden looked at Dylan with something like sorrow. Your mother anticipated that response. Dylan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Mr. Alden read, Dylan, I built a wall of lies, but you chose to decorate it. Every time you mocked your father, you made a choice. Every time you treated his silence as proof of guilt, you made a choice. Every time you stood under that legacy wall and let his face be missing, you made a choice. Dylan's jaw worked. No words came. Caleb Mercer did not destroy Hickory Creek. Caleb Mercer saved it. The sentence filled the room. It seemed to touch every wall, every photograph, every person who had spent 18 years making peace with a lie because the lie was convenient. Mr. Alden lifted the final page. Because remorse without repair is only performance, I have changed my final wishes. Brianna sat straighter. Grant stopped pretending not to care. Troy gripped the edge of the table. Mr. Alden read slowly. I leave Hickory Creek Diner and cabins, including the land buildings, operating accounts, family house recipes, name and all related property to my ex-husband, Caleb James Mercer. Nobody moved. Not Dylan. Not me. Not the family who had watched me disappear and called it moving on. The words did not feel real. Hickory Creek, the diner, the cabins, the porch railings, the counter, the wall where I had been erased. Mine. Mr. Alden kept reading before anyone could explode. I do this not as revenge and not as charity. I do it because Hickory Creek exists today, because Caleb paid the price for my fear. Money cannot return his lost years. It cannot restore the mornings he missed with his son. It cannot undo the shame I allowed to gather around his name. But it can return the place he helped build. My eyes burned. I did not want Hickory Creek. That was the truth. I wanted my son at 6 years old asking me to draw trucks on napkins. I wanted Marianne before pride swallowed her whole. I wanted one person to have told the truth when truth still could have saved us. But life rarely gives back what was taken. Sometimes it only hands you the keys to the room where it happened. Dylan stood so fast his chair fell backward. This is not happening. Mr. Alden folded the letter. It has happened. I'll fight it. That is your right. She was confused. She included a doctor's note confirming she understood exactly what she was doing. Dylan laughed harshly. Of course. More papers. Mr. Alden's voice hardened. No, Dylan. This is not about papers. It is about your mother finally telling the truth. My mother loved me. Yes, Mr. Alden said. And she was ashamed of what that love allowed you to become. That sentence hit harder than shouting. Dylan looked like the floor had moved beneath him. For the first time, I saw him without the performance. No smirk. No polished cruelty. No expensive confidence. Just a grown man standing in the wreckage of the story he had used as a throne. Brianna slowly removed her engagement ring. It made a tiny sound when she set it on the table. Dylan turned. What are you doing? She picked up her purse. You told me this place was yours. It was supposed to be. She laughed once. Cold. Your whole life is supposed to be. Then she walked out. Grant left 2 minutes later, mumbling about calls. Troy stayed seated, sweating through his collar. Dylan watched them go, then turned back to me. His pain had nowhere to go, so it became rage. You stole it. I shook my head. I didn't ask for this. That's your act, he said. The quiet, wounded man. Poor Caleb in the old suit. I stood, slowly. The room seemed surprised I had legs. For 18 years, I had let people talk around me, over me, about me. That morning I was finished. I didn't come here for a diner, I said. My voice was rough but steady. I came because my son told me his mother was dead. Dylan flinched. I came because even after everything I thought grief might make you human for 5 minutes. His face tightened. I came because I remembered carrying you through this kitchen at midnight, when you had a fever and your mother was too tired to stand. The room blurred, but I kept going. I remembered teaching you how to hold a hammer. I remembered carving your initials under booth 3. I remembered you falling asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. That is why I came. For a second, something moved in Dylan's eyes. Something young. Then he buried it. So now you want applause? No, I said. I want you to understand something. I pointed at the $20 bill still lying near my seat. You threw that at me because you thought money measured a man. Your mother gave me this place because she finally understood it does not. I looked toward the legacy wall. My picture was missing for 18 years. But I was still in every board in this building, every rail, every cabin step, every booth your customers sat in. You can take down a photograph, Dylan. You cannot erase the hands that built the house. Nobody spoke. Dylan's mouth trembled. You're not my father, he said. This time the words did not cut the same way. Maybe because I had finally stopped holding the blade for him. No, I said quietly. Not the way I wanted to be. Mr. Alden cleared his throat. There is one final item. Dylan laughed bitterly. Of course there is. Mr. Alden reached into his coat pocket and took out a cashier's check. He placed it on the table in front of Dylan. Dylan stared at it. Mr. Alden said, "To my son Dylan, who has already received years of support, opportunity, forgiveness, and silence, I leave the amount he believed appropriate for his father." He slid the check closer. $15. The room went completely silent. Dylan looked at the check, then at Mr. Alden, then at me. His voice came out small. "She left me $15. Mr. Alden said, "Yes." "My mother?" "Yes." Dylan picked up the check with 2 fingers. For 1 second, he looked like a boy who had opened a Christmas box and found it empty. Then Ruth stepped forward, slowly. She bent down, picked up the $20 bill Dylan had thrown at me, smoothed it with both hands, and placed it beside his $15 check. Her voice trembled, but she did not look away. "Your mother said you might need this more than he does." The room died. Not quieted. Died. Dylan stared at Ruth like she had slapped him. Maybe she had. Not with her hand. With the truth. His face twisted. He tore the check in half. Then again. The pieces fell onto the table like paper snow. "You think this is over?" he said. Nobody answered. He pointed at me. "You'll regret this." Maybe he meant it. Maybe he didn't. But the threat had no weight left. A man who has lost his borrowed crown can still shout like a king. It does not make the room kneel. Dylan stormed through the dining room. The bell above the front door rang violently. A moment later, his SUV started. Gravel spat against the side of the building. Then he was gone. After that, people left quietly. Real families rarely clean up neatly. There were no big speeches, no circle of apologies. No one fell to their knees begging forgiveness. Troy slipped out through the kitchen. A cousin I barely recognized touched my shoulder and whispered I didn't know. I wanted to ask whether not knowing had stopped him from judging me, but I was too tired. Aunt Linda came last. She stood in front of me with red eyes. "I thought keeping peace was the right thing," she said. I looked at her. "No," I said. "You kept comfort. Peace would have told the truth." She nodded once, then left without defending herself. That was the first decent thing she had done all morning. When only Mr. Alden, Ruth, and I remained, the diner felt larger than it ever had. Empty rooms do that after the truth comes out. They make you hear the echoes. Mr. Alden handed me a brass key. It was old, worn smooth at the edges. I recognized it immediately. It was not a key to an office. It was the key to the old pie safe in the pantry, the one Frank Callahan bought at an estate sale in 1978. "Marianne wanted you to have this," Alden said. "What's inside?" Her words were the rest of the truth. I walked to the pantry alone. No plates, no coffee orders, no Marianne calling from the register, no Dylan demanding attention, just the old building breathing around me. The pie safe stood beneath a faded sign that said, "Please don't open without asking Ruth." I almost laughed. Almost. The key turned with a stubborn click. Inside was a blue metal recipe box chipped at the corners. On top was an envelope with my name. My hands shook when I opened it. Inside was a letter. "Caleb, I do not deserve forgiveness. I am writing this because I ran out of places to hide. For years, I told myself I stayed silent to protect Dylan. That was a lie. I stayed silent because the truth made me look weak, and I built my life around looking strong. You saved Hickory Creek. You saved my father's name. You saved me from the consequences of my pride. And I repaid you by letting our son believe you were the shame of this family. There are no words large enough for what I took from you. In this box are copies of the inspection notes, the insurance letters, my journal pages from that week, the contractor statement, and the receipt from the repair crew you paid with your own savings before the claim cleared. I kept all of it. At first I kept it because I was afraid. Later I kept it because some part of me knew the truth deserved to outlive my cowardice. Do whatever you want with it. Burn it. Publish it. Frame it. I have no right to ask anything. But if you keep Hickory Creek, put your picture back. Not for me. Not even for Dylan. For the truth, Marianne. I sat down on an overturned flower bucket and cried. Not beautifully, not dramatically. There is nothing cinematic about an old man crying in a pantry. My shoulders shook. My chest hurt. The tears came from somewhere so deep I thought that place had dried up years ago. I cried for the marriage, for the boy Dylan had been, for the man he became, for the woman Marianne was and was not, for the years no letter could return. Then after a long while I stood. I carried the recipe box into the dining room. Ruth was waiting near the counter. She did not ask what was inside. She just handed me a napkin. I wiped my face. Then I walked to the legacy wall. There was a blank space near the middle where a picture had once hung. The paint behind it was a slightly different shade. Ruth noticed me looking. She took it down herself, Ruth said. When? About a month before she died. Why? Ruth swallowed. She said she couldn't stand looking at the empty space anymore. In the last month, no, Ruth said. At herself. The next week, Hickory Creek reopened. No announcement. No new branding. No celebration. Just open. Coffee at 6. Breakfast at 7. Ruth wrote blueberry pancakes on the chalkboard. I fixed the loose handle on the front door before the first customer arrived. At noon, I took an old photograph from the recipe box. It showed me at 34 standing on a ladder, installing the Hickory Creek sign, while Marianne stood below, holding baby Dylan. All three of us were laughing. I almost did not hang it. The pain in that picture was almost too much. But truth is not only the parts that do not hurt. So I framed it. Then I hung it in the blank space on the legacy wall, right between Frank flipping pancakes and Marianne cutting the ribbon. People noticed. Some stared. Some looked away. One old man from church stopped in front of it, looked at me and took off his cap. That was enough. Dylan did not come back for almost a year. Small towns are built on casseroles and information, so I heard things. Brianna left him. Grant stopped returning his calls. Troy moved to Florida to help a friend open a bar which sounded exactly like Troy. Dylan tried to contest the will, then dropped it when the truth started getting louder than his pride. He disappeared to Chicago for a while. Then one cold morning the following winter before opening, I found him standing outside the diner with his hands in his coat pockets. He looked thinner, older, less polished. I unlocked the door but did not invite him in. He stared through the glass at the wall. His eyes found the photo, the one with all three of us. He looked at it for a long time. Then he said, "Did you put that up to punish me?" Number. Then why? Because it happened. He nodded like he hated that answer. The air was cold. A truck rattled down the county road. Finally, he said, "I didn't know." I looked at him. "You didn't ask." His jaw tightened. "Mom lied to me." "Yes, so did everyone else." "Yes." He looked angry again. Not at me exactly. At the world. At his mother. At the empty space where his certainty used to be. "But you believed it because it gave you permission," I said. His eyes flashed. Permission for what? To be cruel. He looked away. For a second, I thought he would leave. Then he said I was a kid. "You were a kid when it started." He swallowed. "But not when you threw money at me." That landed. His face tightened, but he did not argue. That was new. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. I looked past him into the diner, at the counter I had built, at the wall that finally remembered me. You don't fix 18 years with one sentence. I know. And you don't get a son's place back just because you lost an inheritance. His eyes lowered. I know that too. I opened the door wider. "Ruth needs someone to unload the produce truck." He blinked. "What? You said you wanted to start." "I didn't mean." "I know what you meant," I said. "That's the problem." For a moment, the old Dylan returned. The insult rose to his face. Then he looked at the photo again. Something in him folded. Not broke. Folded. He took off his coat, rolled up his sleeves. And for the first time since he was a boy, my son walked into Hickory Creek without acting like he owned it. He worked 4 hours. Badly. He dropped a box of lettuce. Complained about the cold. Cut his finger on a crate. Ruth told him he was slower than her 80-year-old uncle. He almost snapped at her. Then he didn't. Progress is not always beautiful. Sometimes it looks like a spoiled man learning where the mop is kept. I did not forgive him that day. Forgiveness is not a light switch. It is not owed just because someone finally feels bad. And pain does not disappear because the person who caused it finally understands the shape of the wound. But I let him come back the next morning, not as manager, not as owner, not as heir, as a dishwasher, as a stock boy, as a man learning that respect starts where entitlement ends. Some days he was humble, some days he was not. Some days I saw the boy from booth 3, some days I saw the man who threw $20 at me. Both were true. That is the hard thing about family. People can be the wound and still carry the face you loved before they hurt you. A year later, Hickory Creek was not perfect, but it was honest. We kept the cabins. We fixed the drainage behind the kitchen properly. I turned the old gift shop into a small woodworking corner where I sold chairs and cutting boards. Ruth ran the dining room like a general. Dylan still washed dishes 3 days a week. Sometimes he stayed late to sweep. Sometimes he asked questions before making decisions. Sometimes he stopped in front of the legacy wall and looked at that photo like he was trying to understand the man standing on the ladder. One evening after closing while we were stacking chairs, he said, "Caleb," then stopped. He looked ashamed of the habit. I waited. He swallowed. "Dad," he said quietly, "where do you want these?" The word hit me in the chest. He froze after saying it. So did I. Neither of us made a speech. I just pointed to the corner. "Over there." He nodded. And we kept working. That was not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way people imagine it. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, when they are honest, are worth more than performances. Sometimes dignity is not loud. Sometimes it is an old photograph returned to a wall. Sometimes it is refusing to beg people to believe you. Sometimes it is letting the truth stand without turning it into revenge. And sometimes it is understanding that being erased by your family does not mean you disappear. For 18 years, my name was missing from Hickory Creek. But every morning when the sun hit that old oak counter, it shone on the work of my hands. The world may forget who built the table remembers. And if this story teaches anything, it is this. A family legacy is not the sign on the building. It is not the money. It is not the person who talks the loudest at the head of the table. Legacy is what remains when the lies finally run out. Respect cannot be inherited. Dignity cannot be signed away. And self-worth should never depend on whether the people who hurt you are ready to tell the truth. So let me ask you this. If you had been in my place after 18 years of being erased, would you have exposed the whole family? Or would you have done what I tried to do, rebuild what was broken, without becoming the kind of person who broke it? Tell me in the comments. I'd really like to know.